Good morning, friends and enemies. Today, we're here to talk about the middle rounds of fantasy drafts. They are the forgotten piece of the sandwich, but they are the meat, all right? Everybody gets excited about the early rounds. You get the heavy hitters in rounds 1, 2, and 3, but we're here to talk about rounds 5 through 9 today and how we can build the most effective elite fantasy teams with the guys that will be the foundation of your teams, right? We like the early rounds. We love the later rounds where we get to hit on our sleeper round 11, round 13, guys that are going to end up on the waiver wire within 2 weeks. But there is a systematic approach to the middle rounds. And I want to look at last year's crop of draft picks, the year before that, and see if we can find any sort of trends or any sort of data to take away and see who we should be targeting in this year's drafts. So if you enjoy today's video, hit the button that looks like this, subscribe to the channel. We'll be doing everything early round, mid round, late round, mock drafts, everything in between on the channel throughout the remainder of the summer, okay? So let's start off with this chart. And I went back to the ADP of last year's drafts, and this is basically who I consider were like the top-notch mid-round picks last year. The guys where if you littered these names on your team, you probably did very, 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 very well, barring some injuries here like Rashee Rice and Chris Godwin. I put them on the list just for contextual purposes. Obviously, they got injured and were not on your team towards the end of the year. But end of the day, these were the guys that I felt were like the real mid-round hits. Maybe I missed one or two. Maybe you guys disagree and would have another name or so on here from rounds 5 through 9. But as you can see, we've got Trey McBride, George Kittle, T. Higgins, James Conner, Rashee Rice, Terry McLaurin, Chris Godwin, Tony Pollard, Jackson Smith in Jigba, Brock Bowers, Ladd McConkey, Courtland Sutton, Brian Thomas Jr. So I wanted to see if there were any trends that I could really like point out to exemplify guys that we should be targeting in this next year. And obviously, this is just last year, like a 1-year sample size. You're not betting your child's life on here, but I still think there are some good takeaways that can be had here. The first of which is obviously we have these rookies. We have these very, very explosive breakout rookies, Brock Bowers, Ladd McConkey, Brian Thomas Jr. And, depending on what platform you drafted on, like, Malik Neighbors might have been a mid-round pick. But if you were in more of like a paid league situation, you did a lot of like underdog or best ball drafts, Malik and Marvin Harrison Jr. were very, very early round picks here. So when I look at guys like Brock Bowers, Ladd McConkey, Brian Thomas Jr., you have rookies that are very highly valued, very highly drafted. So the draft capital's up there and they go to offenses, a lot of opportunity to be had. So that's kind of trend number 1. Trend number 2 were veteran pass catchers that got a new quarterback into their offense, into their system. We had Terry McLaurin, who got Jaden Daniels. We had Courtland Sutton, who got Bo Nix. The next group of guys I think we can throw on here, you have the James Conners, the George Kittles. I think David Montgomery, had he not really gotten hurt, and he still finished like pretty highly ranked, honestly, and probably returned ADP for the most part. You have these veterans that are just annually very good, but we as a community are convinced that we know when their age cliff is going to hit. So we're talking about guys who have just been good year after year after year. I'm not talking about guys that we're predicting their age cliff and they also had a bad year last year, like Deebo Samuel or Cooper Kupp, right? Bad years last year. Now we're convinced that they're over the age cliff. It's like, because we have evidence of that. But when you look at guys like James Conner, when you look at guys like George Kittle, it's like, no, all they've done is produce for the last 4 years consecutively, but we're just saying they're old, so we don't want them anymore. So I do want to start this list out with James Conner, okay? We have him going outside of the top 20 running backs. If you look at paid league ADP, we're talking about underdog, FFPC, best ball 10s. He is the RB22, getting picked at the 604. When you start to factor in some non-paid leagues, there is a really good resource for ADP that I'll list below, free to use. This factors in, ESPN, Yahoo, CBS, NFL.com, along with those paid leagues. He does move up a little bit to the RB20 at the 507, but you're still talking about a mid-round pick. And I get it. He's getting old. He's getting up there in age, but there is nothing last year that showed us that the team as a whole is preparing to move on from him. And it's really easy, and I think it's lazy to just look at last year's situation or the last couple of years' situation like I did in this tweet and just say he's going to be good again this year because look what he did the last 2 years. But over the last 2 seasons, if you exclude the games in which he was injured in, so those games, if you look at the game logs, he'll have like 6 carries because he got hurt in the first quarter. If you exclude those games over the last 2 seasons, he has averaged 19.4 total touches, 103.2 total yards from scrimmage, and 0.72 touchdowns per game. So that's the lazy analysis. But when we dive into what Arizona should look like this year, the reason I love James Conner again is because they have now really put together a strong offensive line. Most people are not really diving into like the come-ups of offensive lines, and that's something I try to bring you guys that's a little bit of extra added value here. But Arizona, like Paris Johnson Jr., has taken that step forward. Like, he has returned value on that draft pick that they made on him in the first round. Their offensive line has taken a very, very strong step up, and I would be surprised if they're not a top 10 unit this year. James Conner is the player. They signed him to a 2-year, $19 million extension in week 12 last year. They are bringing back virtually the exact same offense, Drew Petzing, the exact same scheme, personnel. There's no logical reason based on this to think that his role changes. Their defense will be dramatically improved. They bring in Josh Sweat. They drafted Walter Nolan in the first round. They drafted Will Johnson in the second round. They bring in Calais Campbell. You have year 2 of Darius Robinson. I could see them being a much, much, much improved defense on that side of the ball, which will lead to, I think, more ground game. Per Vegas, they are a favorite, -120 to win 9 games or more, meaning they should be competitive weekly and have at worst a very balanced offense. James Conner's rushing props per Vegas are at the same or better, higher than Joe Mixon, Breece Hall, and Kenneth Walker. And the whole elephant in the room here is obviously like Trey Benson. They used a day 2 pick on him last year. He showed almost nothing as a rookie to suggest that they think he's the guy going forward. Even if you think he's going to be a little bit more involved, you don't give a 29-year-old, 30-year-old running back a $20 million extension at the end of the year if you're not going to run your offense through him again. And even if you want to handcuff, even if you think that James Conner is going to miss some games, because he historically does, he played, I think, a career high in games last year, 16 games. Trey Benson's ADP is like RB50, 150 overall. So if you want to grab James Conner in the 5th round, 6th round, and then grab Trey Benson in the 15th or 16th, you have a very clear lineup of like, okay, he's the real handcuff. If Conner goes down, I get to play Trey Benson as a top 20, top 15 back anyway. So James Conner's just been so consistent year after year after year. He's a boring pick, but he is one of my favorite boring picks in fantasy this year, just because, again, there's just no logical reason to think anything changes in this offense as it relates to James Conner outside of people being like, Trey Benson's so good and Trey Benson's going to, take that next step. I just don't think you give James Conner that type of money if internally you're like, yeah, Trey Benson is the future for the running back position on our team. So love me some James Conner. Also, love me some Courtland Sutton. Right now, he is the wide receiver 26 at the 501 in paid leagues. He's also the wide receiver 26, but he drops down to the 506 in all leagues ADP combined. Sutton, when I look at the makeup of the team, one, you just have Bo Nix coming into year 2 in Sean Payton's offense, and I think this is going to be a very, very fluid offense based on what we saw over the second half of last year. They bring in Evan Ingram. Realistically, Evan Ingram is quite literally a check down merchant if there's anyone that can be labeled a check down merchant. His ADOT last year, 5.6 yards, 7.8 yards per reception, 38th amongst tight ends. His ADOT in 2023, 5 yards flat, okay? And Bo Nix is a guy who's been labeled as like also a check down merchant, which is true for the most part, but Courtland Sutton is a dude, he's an intermediate problem for opposing defenses, man, and he was number 3 in the NFL in contested catch rate last year. He did have some drops, but in terms of contested catches, like, he will come down with a lot of the tough throws. He is someone who consistently eats up 14, 17, 22 yards on those post routes. Courtland Sutton had the second most air yards in the league last year. He had 43.2% of all of the Broncos' air yard share and the 7th most deep targets in the NFL. And his catchable target rate ranked 96th in the NFL among wide receivers. There is improvement to be had here. So Evan Ingram, totally different type of player. I do like Pat Bryant, their 3rd round pick. He's someone that I will be drafting at the end of drafts. He's someone that I'm grabbing in the 15th, 16th, 17th round of best ball drafts as well, but that is a long shot. Like, we don't even know if he's going to be a starter outside of him. It could be Devon Vele. You could be, using Marvin Mims more in another check down merchant type of role. But again, what excites me the most is like Bo Nix finished so strong last year. He got off to a very low start, and from what I've read from like all Denver beat reporters, it really came down to the fact that he didn't get all the reps as the one in preseason, and Sean Payton's offense can be very, very complicated, and they felt like he clicked over the second half of last year. They felt like the offensive scheme clicked for him, and that's when he got really, really comfortable. From weeks 8 through 18, Bo Nix was the quarterback 6 in fantasy behind only like the real studs. And during that time frame, Courtland Sutton from weeks 8 through 18 was the wide receiver 10 in PPR. He led the entire NFL with 49% of his team's air yards, 42% of the team's end zone targets, man. So Sutton, maybe he doesn't have the elite talent or separation skills as some of the other guys that are getting drafted a little bit above him, but I just think he's an easy one not to overthink. You get him in the 5th round, you're getting him as your wide receiver 3 if you go with a wide receiver heavy approach that I think can easily finish again as a top 15 fantasy wide receiver. Really good situation, strong rookie coming into his 2nd year, extremely strong offensive scheme, very good offensive line. Like the arrow is only pointing up for Denver. They're supposed to be a very, very good team, and give me the clear alpha on that team. Getting into another clear alpha here, underrated in my humble ass opinion, Calvin Ridley, Tennessee wide receiver. Now, if you've drafted him in either of the last 2 years, you've been disappointed by him, and the market has corrected fully. Like right now, among all leagues, among all platforms, he is the wide receiver 37 going off 80th overall at the 708. He's virtually like the Tony Pollard of wide receivers, where Tony Pollard just kind of consistently gone over 1,000 rushing yards year over year over year. And because he hasn't hit that high ceiling, we underrate him. But now we're at the point where Calvin Ridley's gone for over 1,000 yards in back-to-back seasons. The problem is he's disappointed based on his ADP throughout the summer. Like you drafted him highly, and then going for 1,000 yards does not hit the same as when you draft a guy in the 7th, 8th, 9th round, which is basically where you're getting Calvin Ridley now, and he goes for 1,000 yards. So different situation now. Last year, I mean, his games were wildly inconsistent. He was really bad to start the year and then broke out. But again, going back to kind of the trends that I talked about earlier on in this video, Courtland Sutton breaking out last year, Terry McLaurin breaking out last year. What did they both have? New quarterbacks, new rookie quarterbacks coming in and injecting life into the offense. If you look at the tweet I put out with Calvin Ridley, Sal followed up and, he kind of put it perfectly for me. He said, Ridley led the NFL in unrealized air yards last year. Cam Ward led college football in deep passing last year. Hopefully this fit looks as good in real life as it does on paper. And just going off of more of these stats, right? Like Cam Ward coming in, he is a gun-slinging type of quarterback. You're not going to get any sort of consistency when you have Will Levis or Mason Rudolph throwing you the ball. Like not only did Calvin Ridley just have the most unrealized air yards, he had the most total air yards in the NFL last year. Had a catchable target rate 97th and a target accuracy rating, which takes into effect the length of the targets, 91st among wide receivers in the NFL. There was just so much opportunity to be had for Calvin Ridley that didn't come to fruition because of how bad the targets he got were. They didn't add any real impact players on offense, in my opinion. Like they grabbed a dusty Tyler Lockett, they grabbed Van Jefferson, a handful of day 3 rookie wide receivers. You might have a different opinion than me, but at the end of the day, they're day 3 rookies, and Calvin Ridley's going to run 95% of the routes still in this offense. Like he's not 2019 Calvin Ridley, obviously, with the Falcons, but he's still a very good wide receiver. When we look at the Vegas lines, like here's the difference. You have guys that are going significantly higher than he is. And again, listen, I'm not stupid. Like, of course, some of these guys, Garrett Wilson, Rashee Rice, Jerry Jeudy, are projected to have a lot higher reception total. But when we're talking about Garrett Wilson going at the wide receiver 14, Calvin Ridley going at the wide receiver 37, but the receiving yards line in Vegas is the exact same number, and Calvin Ridley is actually projected to have more receiving touchdowns, something's got to give here a little bit. And to me, it's clear that the market has just moved too far down on a guy like Calvin Ridley. Like when you look at his separation skills, his win rate per fantasy points data suite, 32nd last year among 201 qualified wide receivers, puts him in the 85th percentile. That number was right below CD, was right below Puka Nacua. He's top 20 when you talk about separation score on perimeter routes against man coverage. So the story for me is clear here. I don't feel like he took a big step back in terms of who he is as a wide receiver last year. I think he is a 1,000-yard receiver as long as he is playing 15 to 17 games. And the very, very obvious addition here is the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft, Cam Ward, who loves to throw the ball deep and was very good at it last year. So the market does not like Calvin Ridley. I get it because he has kind of burned them twice because everyone is projected for upside. But if you can kind of switch your mindset and say like, hey, Calvin Ridley may not be a total upside pick, but he's a guy I can draft as my wide receiver 4 that might put up, wide receiver 18 or 19 numbers. That is how you build a super solid foundation, right? That is how you build an elite team that does not have holes in it. And I think Calvin Ridley will be on a lot of teams that we look at that are holeless. And just kind of going off of that point, like when you look back another year, right? When you look back to 2023 and look at some of the best mid-round picks, you have Nico Collins with CJ Stroud being injected into the offense. You have both Debo and Ayuk were top 10 fantasy wide receivers with Brock Purdy's first real year. Like he played, half of the year or, 6-7 games at the end of 2022, but 2023 was his first real year as the quarterback. Debo and Ayuk both played really well. So again, the point is not so much that we're going to be able to predict which new quarterbacks or which new receivers to new teams playing with new quarterbacks are going to break out But that's the point. Like, we can't really predict it, so it's worth sprinkling on a lot of these guys. When a new quarterback breaks out, their biggest beneficiaries are the weapons around them. So instead of the fantasy people painting every murky quarterback situation as some sort of negative, like, we don't know about the quarterback situation, I think it's worth also flipping the coin a little bit and saying this could be a positive thing. We've seen this year over year. A lot of the veteran wide receivers that we think are talented that haven't got to the next level yet typically get held back by quarterback play. So when they have a new injection of someone that could be good, we don't know. Cam Ward could be, the next Jameis Winston. Cam Ward could be the next Jamarcus Russell. But what if Cam Ward is like the next Jordan Love? What if Cam Ward is just the next gunslinging quarterback that throws for 4,400 yards a year? You don't know that. I don't know that. But if it happens, Calvin Ridley is going to be a monster pick in fantasy this year. The tight end position is a little bit trickier to identify here. I couldn't really find a ton of trends, but I will say on that note, when we're looking at a guy like J.J. McCarthy coming in, murky quarterback situation. We're unsure about Justin Jefferson because of a new quarterback again. TJ Hawkinson, we're unsure of because of the weapons, because of a new quarterback again. I've tweeted this out. JJ McCarthy's yardage and touchdown numbers per Vegas are really, really high. And it's because the KLC offense, obviously, there's just a floor that's padded in there. And we look at, Jonnu Smith moving over to Miami, new quarterback. Zach Ertz moving over to Washington, new quarterback. Mike Gesicki moving over to Cincinnati. He has a new quarterback. Like, that's something I'm looking at. Like, the breakout tight ends typically come from new situation or new quarterback, and that is what we're getting for TJ Hawkinson. Now, he is like a 5th or 6th round pick, so I don't know how much juice is really still left there to squeeze, because statistically last year, Darnold was very, very good. Just from like a touchdown number, and Hawkinson didn't really blow anything out of the water. So with Hawkinson, he is another year removed from the ACL tear, so we're expecting him to be at full strength, and I feel like that is kind of an underrated storyline here. So I do like Hawkinson being on this list. Before we get into the next player, all of these players, all of my best information, I put out a lot of videos throughout the summer. I'm going to combine them. I'm going to put everything together in a nice, neatly organized package for you in our draft guide, as we always do every single summer. It will have all of my rankings as well. So if you just want to go off the rankings list that I put together, regardless of what type of league you're in, PPR, half PPR, standard, super flex, all that kind of shit, all the rankings will be in there. All right. And we will have a very, very, very heavily discounted price for you guys that are either one, new to BetMGM and have not placed a bet on the platform if you're in a state where they are live and legal, or two, just for the people that are not in those states, we also have a pre-order price for you. Those pre-order pricing will go live on July 10th. So if you want to be notified when that goes live to get it for a very, 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 very heavily discounted price, sign up for the email list down below. I won't annoy you. I won't spam you. I will just let you know when that discount goes live. Email list, free to join, obviously. Just drop your email and I will notify you the day that pre-order discount goes live for you. All right, email list down below. Let's move to our next player on the list, which is Mr. Isiah Pacheco out in Kansas City. He's going off the board at RB29, and I get it. He's getting faded because of how he finished last year. But let's not forget, the man was like 8 weeks off of a broken leg. To have expected anything crazier or better feels like we're a little bit crazy. Now, we got like a taste of it at the beginning of last year with Pacheco, where we're like, oh, he's going to be the workhorse. He was such a good 3rd round pick, and then he gets hurt. Extremely similar to Tony Pollard in 2020. People wrote him off because he had an inefficient year based on the broken leg. Like, he was a horrid pick because his ADP was like the 1-2 turn, and he was supposed to be in this really, really amazing situation. Breaks his leg, 2022 playoffs. This was just something that I wrote in last year's draft guide when I put Tony Pollard into the must draft category. Pollard's performance last year was hampered by a fibula fracture and an ankle injury sustained in the 2022 playoffs. He revealed that he wasn't fully healthy until week 11 of the 2023 season. From week 11 onwards, Pollard's stats, per Nathan Janke of PFF, highlighted that Pollard had a league-leading 90.8 PFF rushing grade, 4.2 yards per attempt, 3.3 yards after contact per attempt, 0.28 avoided tackles per attempt, and a 24% first down rate. His 92.3 PFF rushing grade over the past 3 seasons is the highest among running backs who have played more than 1 season over that span. Now, the obvious difference here is we never got to see Pacheco be good again. We got that glimpse of Tony Pollard from week 11 on, but I would bet my children's lives on it. Once training camp hits this offseason, we are going to hear a ton of reports about how Pacheco is the starter. He's taking all the snaps with the ones, and he looks back to his old self, and his price is going to continue to skyrocket, all right? We will be like 10 months removed, 11 months removed from the Pacheco injury. And again, he was like 9-8 weeks out from when he broke his leg. looked horrendous at the end of last year. And I think to have expected anything more, you were wildly optimistic. I mean, everybody wanted to be optimistic. Of course we did, right? But it didn't happen. Now, with what they have in the backfield, they re-signed Kareem Hunt. They did let Samaje Perine walk. And I do love Brashard Smith. I'm a big fan of him. But at the end of the day, he's a rookie 7th round pick. It's fair to be concerned about Pacheco's opportunity share because I think momentum in the NFL is a very, very real thing for a running back. Like last year, if he did not get hurt, I think there's a chance that we see him play the full year out as a guy who got 85% of the opportunities, and that's an RB1 in the making. Like he had that passing down role too. It's unlikely that they ride him again, but I still think we're talking about a guy who's going to be a starter, who brings a level of explosion that they simply do not have outside of Brashard Smith there. And this is the team with an 11.5 win total, all right? At RB29, you and I should be taking Isiah Pacheco without a doubt. Once the reports start hitting and he moves up to like the RB21, the RB20, the RB19, there's probably a different conversation to be had. But right now, if you're drafting in best ball, if you have early drafts, whatever, Pacheco should be a target this late in drafts. As we move a little bit more into like the unknown of the mid-round running backs, I genuinely think it's probably just a good system or a good approach to sprinkle on these other rookie running backs. Like if we look at 2023, the running backs that broke out that were mid-round picks were all year 2 running backs. Rashad White, Isiah Pacheco, James Cook. There were no clear starters in front of those guys. I don't know how many running backs from last year's rookie class qualify for that. Like we have Bucky Irving already broke out. Trey Benson has James Conner in front of him. Marshawn Lloyd has Josh Jacobs in front of him. Ray Davis has James Cook in front of him. Blake Corum has Kyron Williams in front of him. Jalen Wright has Devon Achane in front of him. Like, what a backup-ass running back draft class we got last year. You got Garendo with C-Mac in front of him. Will Shipley with Saquon in front of him. Braylon Allen has Breece Hall in front of him. It's actually insane. Based on this category, maybe the answer is just Tyrone Tracy again. Love Cam Scatabo, but like crazier things have happened. So when I look at the rookie class, I do think your best bets, depending on where they go in the drafts, are taking shots on the Caleb Johnsons, who's like one of the later round guys relative to the other rookie running backs. RJ Harvey, if his price moved down far enough, he was like starting to creep into the mid-4th, so I don't really consider him a mid-round guy anymore. But with the J.K. Dobbins signing, he'll probably start to move closer to mid-5th, early 6th, and maybe in your friends and family leagues, he'll be in end of 6th, 7th round. So guys like Caleb Johnson, RJ Harvey, Trayvon Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, Hampton, and Genty are obviously going to go way too early to really categorize this. But I do think if you're in 2, 3 leagues, taking a shot on a couple of these different young, explosive, high draft capital type rookie running backs will do you a lot of good. You'll have to be a little bit patient, so you build your team around knowing that, after the first 4 or 6 weeks is when they probably really start to ramp up. Though I do think Caleb Johnson and RJ Harvey immediately start as high opportunity players because of the competition that they're going against. So Trayvon Henderson, he might be relegated to like a pass catching role with some sprinkle of early down carries to begin with. Ramondre Stevenson, same thing. Quinshon Judkins, we're not really sure how that Cleveland backfield is going to play out or if that team will even be able to run the ball more than 20 times a game, but I regress. And that is how I will wrap up this video for y'all. The mid-round players that I just think are being wildly overlooked that build the foundation and the core of what a successful fantasy team will do in 2025. Okay, so again, if you enjoyed the video, hit the button that looks like this down below, please. Subscribe to the channel while you are down there. We'll be putting out videos like this throughout the rest of the summer, 3-4 times a week. All right, I love you, and I'll see you when I see you. Smoochies.